Okay, so this is going to be a big treat for all of our listeners. We have over here Rabbi Gav Friedman, aka Rav Gav, and he is one of the most sought-after speakers within the Jewish circuit, and I think it's because of your nice, good looks. Welcome, Rav Gav, to the Empowered Jewish Living podcast.
Finally, someone recognizes my looks. Everybody else, shkoyach. Yeah, the honor and the privilege to be with the Heiligen of Shlomo. We go back a long time, my friend.
Absolutely. First of all, I love the fact that you use the word Heilig, but you're going to have to translate everything for our wide range of listeners. But yes, we do go way back, yeshiva mates.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I remember our first, before you were Rav Gav inspiring the masses, you were Rav Gav playing electric guitar behind your head.
Yeah, I got in big trouble for that at some weddings, but yeah.
Do you still do that, by the way?
I still can. Electric, I haven't played in a long time, but acoustic electric, I've played many times.
But I was saying behind the head thing.
Yeah, we do Baruch Hashem. Yeah, I had the privilege of, one of the, again, I don't know, forgive me for taking this wherever I go, but when I was just a youngster, a lad, I was in a camp called Camp Masora, and I was running the music staff at the time. And there was a guitar player by the name of Yossi Piamenta.
He played at my wedding, by the way.
He played at your wedding?
Wow. Oh, yeah. He's a Hall of Fame guitarist.
So he's he's like the original behind the head shtick, that all the Jews try to copy.
Yeah.
And when he came, he knew that I played. So he's a very chilled, Oliver Shalom, a very chilled out, a blessed memory, very chilled out person. And he gave me the guitar in the middle of the concert, and I got to play his guitar in front of him on stage, doing the shtick with the behind the head. That was a lot of fun.
That is a real honor. He's the best of the best. All right, so let's get into it. This is it's a powerful time of year. We're going to be posting this right after Purim, as we're starting to think about Pesach. And I actually thought that you would be a great guest because, Rav Gav, you're kind of like Purim and Pesach combined. Like if I had to label you like specific holidays, you got a little bit of Purim and a little bit of Pesach. So we're going to get into it. But before we do, is that your computer mine? That's you?
Okay. I'm going to shut that off. Sorry.
Just so you sure.
What was that? All right. Yeah. And it's gone. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, before we do, so not all of our listeners, some of our listeners might not know who you are. So can you start off, tell us a little bit about who Rav Gav is. Don't give them, we don't need you, all of your history and all that, but who are you today? What's your mission? What drives you? What's your passion? Just give us a little bit of a window into the world of Rav Gav.
Okay, so I guess it's important just to give a little summary, just a little bit of background. So I'm from a place called New York, so that has a major impact on my existence.
Yes,
say you can take the boy out of New York, can't take the New York out of the boy. They say it about a lot of places, but New York, it's true. So from New York, grew up in a religious home. My what would be probably termed as modern Orthodox. It's very hard to really give definitions to this. And who I am is I would like to think that I am interested when I'm interested in, very not interested when I'm not interested in. And my particular teaching style was something that I always had. And people ask me often, like, so when did you get into speaking and to teaching and all that kind of stuff? And what steps can I take? And there was never a time that I got into it in my entire life. That's what I did. When I was, as a kid, I always spoke. By family events, I was the speaker, as young as I can remember. And so then when I went to yeshiva to study abroad, it just continued that way. I was the one who was usually the center of attention because a bit out there, I would say an extrovert, but others say maybe I'm an introvert that plays. I don't know the psychology of it, but I would think I'm an extrovert. And I like to discuss and talk about ideas that are very real to my own personal life. So that's why I think it's, and like you said, I really like what you just said. I never would have pegged myself like that, but the Purim/Pesach is very accurate because my personality is a lot of humor. A lot of just chill out, everyone, take it easy, let's enjoy ourselves. But at the same time, I like to think there's a lot of depth to what we're discussing: amuna, faith, trust, understanding, and those kind of stuff. So that's the basic nutshell. Grew up in New York, religious family. Always enjoyed speaking and talking and that kind of stuff. Never had in mind to do what I'm doing right now. Got involved with an organization which I believe that we were together at as well, besides yeshiva, called Aisha Torah, and things just led one to the next. Can you speak here? Oh, that went well. Someone else, can speak, etc. Until today, thank God, I've had the privilege to be able to speak, talk, lecture, shira size, whatever word you want to use, in many different places, including Washington, D.C., Maryland, in Washington, D.C., and Maryland.
It's interesting because I think that for people to get a better understanding of the audience, and you've spoken to all sorts of audiences through your travels, but I think you became best well known because you were teaching those classes at Aisha Torah in the Old City. And that was, which you still are, and that was teaching to, probably for the most part, you were teaching college students or post-college students who might have had a slight spark lit in them on their campuses. Rabbis now are bringing them on fellowship trips, short trips, birthright-like trips to Israel. These are complete, disconnected kids who are somewhat wary of observant Judaism. And Gav Friedman, you are very often kind of their first point of contact. Rabbis are entrusting you to speak to them and kind of push them, nudge them forward. Would you say, is that accurate? Is that an accurate description of what you do there?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people, when they say in the quote unquote line of work that I'm in, they say, "Oh, you're like front line out there," and this, I'm not front line at all. There are people out there like you said, on campuses and communities, and people out there that are just available to help Jews be able to get more information, learn more, connect to the heritage, etc. And yes, the next part is correct. I would say second line or even third line of they'll come to Israel, they're on some trip, and then they throw them in front of me. And they're hoping that I'm going to give them something there that they're going to actually enjoy. So right. Yeah, the answer, that is what it is. And it's, like you said, primarily college, post-college, age that was going on in Aish.
Yeah. And the reason why I wanted to make that clear is because I want our listeners to realize that Rav Gav, you're in the line of work where you're really throwing ideas at these students that maybe the rabbis didn't feel comfortable that they can pull them in there yet. The rabbis had to keep it light just to get them on the trip. And I've seen you do this in action. You are now suddenly, you're speaking to them about all sorts of things, all sorts of Jewish concepts that are meant to kind of nudge them a little bit more and make them really take it seriously. And because of that, you face a lot of resistance also. You're in a way, you're there, you're funny, but you're also trying to make them feel a little bit uncomfortable. And I think what I'd like to hear from you is, just because you teach us so many topics, what are some of your home run topics that you feel really are able to open up their heart, really shake them up a little bit, and open up their eyes to take Judaism seriously?
First of all, you are so good at this. I want to tell you, this is excellent. You're really good at this. There's different genres of topics that come up with the different groups. And I'll give you a little example. Last night I taught for a group that were not even post high school. They're 18, 19, 20. And I went in to go teach. There's about 80 of them, 80 students, boys and girls, from South Africa, Australia, some from New York, and from different interesting, for me, interesting, more, I guess for them it's normal. But so I went and I said, "What do you want me to teach? What am I doing with them?" And they said, yeah, go get them, go get them. Yeah, you can do it. We believe in you, Ace, And I'm thinking what am I supposed to do with a brand new group? And you're not giving me any direction. Yeah. I'm not there. So what am I going to do? So I'm not going to start heavy. I'm not going to go in there and be is there a God? Even though that in theory, there could be that conversation, but what I like to talk about is something which is universal and extremely relatable, and that I know that it's going to be enjoyable, right? So last night's topic was called the power of speech. We all talk. We all discuss. Everybody. This is not something particular to even a Jew. It's just we speak, we talk, right? So maybe we could look from a Jewish perspective. What does it mean, speech? What is the idea behind speech? Now, what I would say is a little more unique in what I do than what other people do in my experience is that humor is not attempted. It's not, I'm going to now be funny. It's that, thank God, this is a very natural thing. I'm just a person who's into humor. That's just what I'm into. The people that when they phrase me, a lot of times they'll put me in different communities. They'll say the Jewish Robin Williams. I like to minus the depression, thank God. Or I guess that's what every comedian would say, wouldn't they? But the answer is like minus the depression. And then the way I teach is very straightforward. I'm talking with you. I'm not talking at you or whatever. This is a back and forth. It's very interactive. So this particular topic to open, let's go something which we could all relate to. We all get, and let's take a look in that angle. That's like a starter, a type of class that I would use, like power speech, universal, men, women, and children, ages, stages, background.
Trying to get across what message?
As simple as it sounds,
boil it
power
down.
Speech,
power speech,
right? Trying to get a power
words
speech.
that you say are powerful. They matter.
Yeah. I like to go into a little bit more the impact, right? So what's going to happen when you talk? What's funny is that whenever people ask me, so what do you suggest? And I say the power speech. Like, doesn't sound so interesting. I'm like, I'm really not good at telling you what I'm going to talk about. Let's just do it. I think you'll enjoy it, right. But if you sum it up at the end, so what you talk about, the answer is the power of speech. What does the Torah have to say about it? What does God have to say about it? How does it affect your life? Is there a way of having a better quality of life if we speak differently? What happens on a Kabbalistic level when we speak? How does it impact us in levels that we're not even aware that are happening? And levels we are aware, but we're just not paying attention. I guess which is your alley, like with the mindfulness, be aware. One of the topics I know that you're involved with mindfulness. So like open up the mind a little and just pay attention to what you're doing. This is actually the finale of the class. I speak about that. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, fine. So now they're here, they're listening, power of speech. They're like, okay, Judaism has something unique to offer, the power of speech. And now you're warming him up a little bit. All right, where do you take him next?
Well, so, it's like anything, a suggestion I would make for somebody who wants to be effective in getting across any message that they would like is to build a rapport. So if you want to build some sort of rapport, some sort of relationship, it has to be done in a way where it's comfortable, it's relaxed. Once we have that rapport, that comfortable, relaxed thing, so then now we can take this in any number of directions. I'm very big on, I notice this is interesting. I wouldn't know how to answer this question had I not been forced a couple of years ago, where I still am in Eishat Torah in the old city of Jerusalem, when they asked me to give a list of all my classes and what topic or category they fall into.
Okay.
So it was interesting. I didn't know this about myself. Overwhelming majority of it is interpersonal relationship and personal development. Okay. So it's like, it was fascinating to me. Power of speech would fall into personal development, work on the way in which you speak. Judging favorably would be called interpersonal relationships, right? So that's like one genre is self-growth, right? Then the next one, I guess it falls into three categories, which is well known in the Jewish world of, well, two of them are more well known, but the third one is also known. Bein Adam la'atzmo, bein Adam la'chavero, bein Adam la'makom, which falls into the three categories of between man and self, between man and fellow man, and then between man and God. So those are the three categories which all of my classes fall into in some way, shape, or form. Somebody asked me a couple of years ago, I was teaching in what's called the ELC, or used to be called the ELC, Executive Learning Center.
Sure.
That's right, which I'm sure you were involved with. And this guy, he came in and I don't know who he was. He came, he sought out to have certain speakers. And when I came in, I said, so what do you want to talk about? One-on-one. And he says to me, well, what's your specialty?
Ooh.
I was stumped.
Yes.
I had no way of answering. I was like, my specialty, besides evolutionary sciences, it's like we spent the next 45 minutes just for me, like developing what is my specialty.
Right.
And I came out with the following answer. I have an answer to the question, and it's a very Isha Torah type of discussion. My specialty is to give people the ability to choose to be atheists.
Okay.
That is my specialty.
Say it again. Say it again one more time.
My specialty is to give people the ability to choose to be atheists.
Okay, expound.
Right. So now what that means is if somebody decides along the way to not be an atheist, that's also their choice. But it's don't just be an atheist because you are, just because society dictates something, because in your textbook currently in the school you're in, that's what they said. So if you break it down, all the things we said before, man itself, man of God, all that stuff. But really what I'm trying to do is just like, let's just think about it. Let's put it out there. I'm not coming to tell you to do anything in your life. I have my opinions of what you should do, but I know that's not going to be helpful. So I'm not going to tell you what to do. Yeah. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put out there on the table ideas, which many of them are self-evident, but not yet structurally thought out. And then let's discuss it. Let's get into it. Why do we do this? Why do you do that? Why do you believe in God? Why don't you believe in God? Why should you believe in God? Why shouldn't you? You know, and then essentially, obviously it depends on the person if it's a one-on-one, but if it's in a group setting, so then we can go and take steps to bring out a particular hypothesis, and then they can argue it out. You know, anyone in my class knows, if they've been there long enough, my biggest pet peeve is when you walk out of my class and say, what I would have said is.
Right.
I'm not lecturing. I'm not lecturing to you. Yeah. I'm talking with you. If you don't like what I'm saying, argue with me. I'm from New York. We thrive off this.
I'm smiling now, first of all, because my memory train is going, and I'm remembering different situations where, we're like question and answer sessions. So first I'm remembering just different ones at conferences with, college kids, young professionals, and seeing you, really get into some heated conversations. And then I'm also remembering now when we brought some guys to Israel, and it was third meal once on Shabbat, and one of my guys just totally went off on you, throwing all sorts of profanities. Do you remember this? I don't know if you remember that. Literally, I didn't even remember, but all sorts of profanities. But I guess at some point when you move past, you're once you're talking about self-growth, you're kind of in neutral territory. Relationships, you might get into some, boy-girl stuff. Once you get into God, now you're already opening up the Pandora's box of all that. What would you say are the messages that you're able to give over now that you say really resonate? Like when you say, well, I go into this, I know now I'm swinging for the fences. And also, a second question, you can answer this however you'd like. What are those that you go into and you say, okay, this is danger zone. I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback here, but we got to talk about it.
It's interesting. I rarely, if I'm going to do a la Sheni Rishon, just go in the second question first, to go out of the order of the sage's advice. I'm going to say to you that I rarely. That's not true. I'll say something, I'll retract it. I rarely get into controversial topics. I rarely get into controversy. Let me say it differently. I will discuss things that may be looked upon as controversial, but as we discuss them, they're really not so controversial. I'm not getting into a lot of the current event discussions about,
topics, right?
Dare I give an example of Ben Shapiro style stuff? I'm not getting into that stuff. I'm not talking about politics. I'm not discussing Republican versus Democrats. I'm not discussing XY versus XX chromosomes. I'm not getting into those topics. It's too emotional. It's not a discussion. The quote unquote, as you'll say, the other parts I would say controversial, but really aren't, in my mind, are discussions, but again, someone else might think that they are, is God's existence. The truth of Torah. How do we know that Torah actually is truth? Do we know that it's truth? Those type of stuff that will always be controversy, quote unquote, in the academic world. But I more than welcome anybody to come speak with me about it at any particular time. I'm so happy to have those conversations. That's where it's like, all right, let's talk about it. There's an amazing class which I imagine you've heard and maybe even taught, that Aish Torah. The first time that I heard it was in Aish, and I kind of stole it and made it my own. I just like kind of rebranded it a little, but called Thinking Out of the Box. And if you remember this class, I don't know if you recall this class, but this to me is the number one opener, no matter, and if we're about to get into topics. In other words, if we're going to really talk, step number one is a 45-minute class called Thinking Out of the Box. Now, what the basis of the class is that we have to set the ground rules in order to have a conversation and understand the fact that there's a good chance that you are stuck on a circular train of thought, and perhaps I am also. And if you can show me that, I'm happy to expand myself. But if I can defend myself, you have to be willing to work with what makes sense, right? So in other words, that's where it gets a little bit, essentially what's called controversy whenever somebody doesn't want something, so that's when it becomes a little bit whatever. But again, I'm not really, I try to create the rapport and the relationship in a way that I'm not fighting with you. This isn't a fight. This is a conversation. This is a discussion.
Do you see the nature of the people, the kids specifically, the kids, when I say kids, I mean college age kids, young professionals that you're speaking to? Do you see their attitudes changing at all? Are they more hostile? Are they less hostile? Are they more open, less open? Are they more spaced out, less spaced out? Like, how do you see the evolution of the student who comes on a trip?
It is a fascinating ride. I remember I started teaching and doing this, I guess, quote unquote, line of work again. I call it quote unquote line of work because to me, it's really not work. If you remember the chef in Aish Torah, Chef Herschel used to always say, if you never want to work a day in your life, then do something you love.
So true.
If you do something you love, it's not work. What we're doing right now, I don't know if you're making any money off this. I hope you are, but this is not work. This is
I am not. This is a labor of love, unless those who are listening right now, this is actually a good time to just plug a little sponsorship. If you're enjoying the podcast, please go on my website and sponsor it. But no, this is just because I love schmoozing with Gav and all sorts of cool people.
Right. So it's like when I first got started was in this particular, I guess, evolutionary stage of my life was in 2006. Now, if I could take you on just a bit of a time travel to understand what happened in 2006, the iPhone only came out in 2007. 2004 was the BlackBerry.
Okay.
Right. So we're talking about 2 years after BlackBerry. The world wasn't really sure what's happening. Like that's basically, it's like, what's a BBM again? You know what I mean? Like, how do you do that? So the people were much more focused. And again, there's always I've seen throughout that I believe that the world hasn't changed at all ever. But at the same time, it gives the potential for people to have changed. So what that means is yes, I do see coming into a class, everybody's walking in, you know what I mean? Like on their phones and like holding their thing. And it is a little bit of a challenge, perhaps. That's where I saw that there was some people just don't come. These don't come to classes anymore. They don't whatever. Or they're so busy fact checking you the whole class that they're not actually paying attention. Right, it's ridiculous. Right. It's like, I'm like, the year is now 2022. They're like, okay, and someone's like, guys, he's right. I'm like, did we really just have that argument? Like, so I've seen it's deteriorated, but at the same time, and this I have a claim against the presenters when they go, the attention span of kids these days, has gone down so much. Last night, these 17 to 20-year-olds, I spoke for over an hour. Not one of them was on their phone, and they were all engaged and connected. Why? The answer is because I'm more interesting at that moment than their iPhone is. So when a teacher, a professor, a lecturer comes out and says, kids these days, I want to suggest it's possible, dare I suggest, and get controversial, that maybe it's not the kids that's the problem, but maybe we're not presenting in a way which is, keeping their attention. The things that have.
Yes, that's a really powerful point. And I want to use this whole thing. I want to segue now to discuss a little bit about Passover, but I just want to say something, just commenting on what you just said. And because I know that, many people may be thinking right now, oh, well, Gav Friedman, and like you said before, you're a naturally funny guy. You've always been funny, but what about me? I'm not so funny. But I just want to say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I've seen you teach many, many times, and I've discussed with you your process. Listeners, Gav, you are certain, a lot of it's natural talent, but you are an artist. You are an artist and you have perfected your craft. And I know that the amount of time and attention that has gone into preparation, and I'm sure a lot of your jokes are off the fly, but I'm sure that you've also, like a comedian out there, can we borrow the playbook of a comedian and say, like, you develop your jokes, right? You see something fly, something doesn't, So, you speak just for a moment before we get into the next piece, even though this is relevant to the next piece, but speak for a moment about the development process of your classes, the aspect that that builds on what comes natural, but really cultivates it and really makes it into something special that will hold their attention span.
Yeah, that's great. There's so many aspects, angles of what you just mentioned. I first want to point out that there are different personalities. Not everybody's funny, and not everybody is humor. I think it's a very powerful tool that everyone can use even a little bit. But some are more, thought out, more introspective, more whatever. And nobody should try to be somebody else. It's a problem when people try that. They just say, let me be like you. It's just, no, be like you. You have to master you. So that's number one. Number one is the fact that there is a certain way that I do it, which is just my personality. It is not a Eliezer Blatz speaking training thing. If you remember they did Nation, whatever, there was a speaker training thing that used to be in the yeshiva there. It's not a any sort of Tony Robbins seminar. It's just a reality of just who I am. And now let's move on to the next point: development. Holy moly, because of the classes I used to teach, I would teach sometimes as much as 8 or 9 times a day. I had the Essentials program, which used to run, which isn't running right now, but there's a program called the Essentials program where there was classes all day. It was my playground. It was my laboratory, right, for development. It was actual classes, but it gave me the ability to be able to, smaller crowds and talk with them and see what works and what doesn't, as you said, and to work that through. That's in terms of absolutely, like Malcolm Gladwell, I think, has said that about the 10,000 hour rule, that when you how to become an expert in anything is you spend, 10,000 hours. I've spent well over 10,000 hours involved with what I do. So that certainly has helped. But let's keep working within your question here. We have the idea of, I very, very rarely, if ever, plan out a joke. All my jokes are spontaneous. However, like you said, if it worked, then I'll use it again. And then it becomes planned, right? So what happens it's not like, I sit down, what can I say today that will be funny? It's just like I'm having a class and and a line goes and it worked. Hey, you know what? I'll use it again. That's where that comes up. In terms of development of classes, though, in the beginning of my career, spent days, hours upon hours. When I wanted to teach a 1 hour, 45-minute class, I would have 20 pages of written notes, sourcing places from all over the place. I spent a tremendous amount of work. It's like everybody sees when the basketball team goes to the championship, but nobody sees the practices. The practices are murder. You have to run suicides. Suicides. That's a type of practice. You run back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I spend so much time preparing, and people are like, "Oh, look, the guy got up and he made a funny," it's just like, "Yep, I did that," but the it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work, and then got over the years, so then it becomes a lot easier, once you get the hang of things. But it was a process. It was certainly a process, and
Yeah,
and
so
before you,
that's really good to hear. And with that, now I want to speak about the Passover Seder. Based on
yeah,
that, and especially,
perfect segue.
it is a perfect segue because one of the things that I really wanted to, one of the what that the discussions that I wanted to have for our listeners, assuming that several of our listeners will be leading Passover Seders. If not this year, then hopefully in the future. We have great young professionals who listen to the podcast, who are developing their style, envisioning what their home is going to look like. Some are going to be doing it this year. Some people are going to be attending Seders that they've gone to every single year and don't feel that it's inspiring. And hopefully they are in a place where they can change the trajectory of the Seder. So the way I see it, at least, for me, is that if you're leading a Seder, and Seders could be long. My Seder is 4 or 5 hours. I don't know about yours, but you are, number one, you got to engage the people at your Seder table. You got to be engaging. You have to be interesting. Number two, you're giving over some of the most important messages within Judaism. So I want to speak about both of those things with you, and I want to really pick your brain on those 2 points. Number one, what you see are some of the key messages of the Seder, what you feel that parents should be giving over to their children, what Jews should be discussing at the Seder. And then number two, just in terms of like tactics, or, how to give it over, how to really be a leader and give it over to them. So those are 2 different things. So let's first start at least just with content and certain messages, because I know you have so many Passover classes. What do you think? How do you see the goal of the Passover Seder? What are the messages that you think we should be giving over to the next generation?
That's a really good question. Firstly, it's there are various different types of seders that we have. You have a family seder, and that's one type. And that would be like if you're talking about kids that are at different ages and stages. I don't know who's listening, but there's certain people here that maybe don't have a family yet, or maybe are married and don't have children yet, or maybe you have children that are very young, or you have children that are older, or you have children that are out of the house. And
they're all listening. They're all listening. Thank God.
So you have that style, and then you have a style of like people that are just a group of friends that are getting together, or people that you're interested in. Hold on a second. You still with me? Oh, there you are. Yeah, no idea what just happened on this computer because I stole it from my wife. Anyway, so and then they're the ones that that like you're doing it for other people, etc. I want to add to one comment you made just a moment ago about how there's some of the most fundamental ideas of Judaism. According to the commentaries, this is not some of the fundamental. This is the basis of Judaism.
Yes,
the Passover Seder is the starting point. It's the beginning. It's everything. As a matter of fact, some commentators say if you are not familiar with the storyline of Egypt leading up until Sinai, then you're lacking the structural foundation of your entire existence. It's not like, this is like another nice idea. Without this idea, you don't have anything. Now, what do I mean you don't have anything? Of course, a person can connect to different ideas within, whatever it is that they're looking to connect with. However, if you want to know the actual, as we say, the base, the root of Judaism itself, it is this holiday. Now, this holiday, again, if we're looking in terms of the actual calendar, this holiday is then followed up by another holiday called Shavuos or Shavuot. That holiday is where we received the Torah and became the Jewish people. Before that, we're called the Israelites, right? Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, who was one of the names of Jacob, right? That's what. But then we came into our own. The coming of age of sorts was Sinai, but the basis of that is coming from the storyline of Egypt. And I find it interesting, and I think this is a well-known idea that even you find people that are not necessarily connected to their Judaism. They may not have ever kept anything, practiced whatever. I find one of the most celebrated holidays, even without knowing what you're celebrating, it's a holiday of Passover.
Yeah.
You find families that get together. It's possible they'll have non-kosher bread at the meal, but that's not the point. The point is that they're coming together to have a seder. Many are familiar with the Haggadah, right? They'll know what's going on, even if they don't know what's going on. Why is that? Why do you think that is? Even though they have nothing to do with it, they still have something to do with it. Answer is because of the fact that it was ingrained in our existence. This is one of the things that comes up every day in Jewish life. We discuss Egypt. It's in our prayers. We speak about it in the Shema. And it just happens to be that we say it every week when we make Kiddush on wine, or if you're like me, because I can't handle it, grape juice.
Really?
I'm not a wine guy. Not a wine guy. The Seder I have the 4 cups that I nail like holy moly, but I'm floating during the Seder. But I'm so not a wine guy. But the point is, when we make Kiddush, we mention that. Well, every single holiday mentions Egypt. What is that? The answer is that was the roots, quite literally. Think about what that word means. When I say roots, I mean the actual roots. We're going deep into the ground. We were become a Jewish people through that experience of Egypt and coming out of that. So that's a very fundamental concept to be aware of. If you're going to do a Seder, I would say that one of the ideas that we want to try to instill in ourselves and those that are around us, to get a point across is, this isn't just another holiday. This is the holiday. This is Judaism in a nutshell, right? So that's that would be the beginning point of what I would say is something to get across. Now, another major role of the Seder, right? Which, for those who are not familiar with what I mean when we've been saying Seder, right? So we know that on Passover, it's an 8-day holiday, 7 days in Israel, 8 days. Well, that can get a little confusing. I won't get into that. But the point is, let's say an 8-day holiday. And on the first and second nights, we customarily sit and we have a meal. And that meal consists of 15 different steps where we go through different lessons and growth. And the fundamentals of that Seder, which literally means order, is the idea of asking questions. So we start to see something fascinating. Judaism, the basis of the religion is Passover, it's Pesach. And if you break down the actual part of Pesach, it's all about questions. Judaism we're not scared of questions. We may not have the answers right away. We may not have them ever. There could be, you got some great questions out there. But not only are we not scared of questions, we encourage questions. Ask, challenge, understand, realize what's happening. And you know what? If you don't get the answer, let's discuss it. Let's talk about it. Let's think about it. Back to the discussions we had before. How do we know it's true? And why should we live this way? And what's the benefit? And isn't it archaic? And what does it have to do with me? And how does it impact my life? And all that jazz, as they say. So number one is understanding the fact that this is the holiday. Let's try to get that across, understand that, and build the steps to understand why that may be, what's so crucial about that, and how we became a nation. If you want to know anything, Tov achar davar merishisa. You want to know how something's going to end, you got to know the beginning. So what's the beginning? And then we could talk about 2022. But first, let's talk about a couple thousand years ago. By a couple, I mean a few thousand years ago, and try to get down to understanding what that is. So that's the beginning. But I'm passing on to you back at the studio, Chuck. What do you say?
No. That's really great. That's really great. And absolutely it is. And I think once we lay that down, I guess the next question and the next point would be, okay, so, maybe the Seder, if the Seder was simply a discussion as to, 10 proofs of God's existence, or how do we know that, the Torah is true? Would that be an appropriate Seder? There's got to be something specific within the story of the Jewish people being slaves in Egypt, going out, right? That story forms the foundation of our faith.
Yeah.
And there's so many points within that. And I'm just curious, in the way you see it, the way you conduct your own Seder, what do you focus on in that story that makes that story the foundation of everything that we believe as Jews?
Yeah. So in my particular Seder, there are various things that we discuss and we go through. It's not so much proving that God exists or doesn't exist. It's more so the nature of God's existence. So when we talk about, when you go through one of the pinnacles of the apexes of the Seder is discussing there's a Jewish people are making their way out, the Exodus. And it's actually the year before the Exodus that goes through all the different plagues, all the plagues. I know some people prefer the word consequences. I
Hmm.
was once teaching a group once, so in a school. I don't know if I could say where, but I was somewhere. I actually remember the name of the school. I remember where it was. I remember the city. I remember the people. But I went and I said something with the 10 plagues, and they said, we call it here the 10 consequences.
Wow.
I said,
Talk
okay.
about
I said,
PC. Yeah.
yeah. I said, but I also thought, like, interesting. It was fascinating to me because I guess they certainly are consequences.
Mhm.
It wasn't, it was a consequence of their actions. But when you go through the plagues slash consequences, and just it gives you a structural understanding without getting now stuck into the actual, was it the Malbim and the Maharal, or the different commentaries of who say what, but understand that, like, each plague is connected to something, and it shows you how God interacts in our world and interacts with us.
Mhm.
Very powerful idea.
Yes.
Very powerful idea, because everybody that believes in God would say, okay, so there's a God. But what I find happens very often is, what does that guy have to do with me? You know what I mean? Like, okay, so there was a God, or even if there is a God, but he's busy with big stuff out there. What does he have to do with me? When you go through the steps, you see God's sovereignty over the land, over the air, over the sky, over the heavens, and the finale. This is a great idea, which I must have heard at some point in my life, but I was in a place called I can't remember. In it's an hour and a half outside of San Diego. Yitz Jacobs, Rabbi Yitz Jacobs is a rabbi in LA, and we were doing a for Aish in LA. I can't remember the name. Anyway, he said a beautiful idea, and we were talking about the idea of Passover and the Exodus, and he said when you go through the plagues, you see the order, the finality, the last one, which is finality. It's Makas Pechoros. It's the plague or the consequence of the death of the firstborn son, where God's like, not only do I control the water and the ground and the I'm connected with you, with your existence,
Mhm.
whether you live or you die. What's the quality of your life? What's that? That's a very powerful idea to think, like, wait a minute, this isn't just some sort of esoteric exercise, existential this is a personal connection and relationship with the creator of the world. So that's one of the messages that I try to get across for myself, for
Mm.
my children. Although,
I
of course,
love
we
that.
talk about these things the whole year. You know what I'm saying? As we talk about this all the time, but Pesach is like a pinpointed, like, boom, straight to it.
I love that. I love that. And specifically with the 10 plagues, especially because many of our children are growing up. I mean, the plagues are a fun story. Like, it's fun to think about the bad guy getting swarmed with frogs, like, but because of that, we can get caught as much of Torah, as much as it's true with much of Torah, with Purim and with other things, because we're taught things in funny ways, in cartoon ways, in animated ways. We get stuck in that paradigm. And as adults, we're like, okay, that was the kid's story, and where do you go from there? The plague specifically, and I've been writing about this, God willing, I'm working on my second book, and with God's help, I hope to submit, a manuscript sometime soon, but I'm, focusing a lot on the second book of the Torah. A lot of my first book focused on the first book. And just think about the plagues, every single one of the plagues, there's so many commentaries, like you mentioned before. But one aspect of each of the plagues was that Egypt had so many different gods. So when you think about swarming frogs. Well, you know what? Go to the Smithsonian Museum and look at ancient Egypt, and what were their gods? They had frog gods, and they had lice gods, and they had all these gods. Why were they worshiping them? Well, that's because they saw within the frog, they saw within the lice, they saw aspects of their own life that they came to worship. So these things are like, it was real to them. It was real to them. These plagues were hitting in major aspects of their life. And once you start looking at it that way, then you know what? Now you look at your own life. One second, you might not have a frog in your life, but you might have some frogginess in your world, things that you're doing. So once you unpack it, it's a fascinating story.
Yeah, this is there, if I could throw out a book, and it's not yours yet, but if I could throw out a book that I so recommend, if I'm allowed to do this, I don't know the rules here.
Do it. We'll call the author up and we'll get a little bit of kickback.
Exactly. We worked that out because that's what I was, but the book is called, and I'm certain you read this book. You know what I'm going to say?
The Exodus you jumped over, that one, the passed over?
I never heard that, but that sounds
Foreman.
good.
That's Foreman.
Oh, okay. I know Foreman.
Yeah, what were you going to say?
It's called Let My Nation Go.
Oh, yeah, sure.
A book written by someone named Yosef Deutsch. Let My Nation Go. He takes the story of Egypt and he brings it to life in such, it's already alive, the book. The story is alive. Nobody's heard the story of Exodus and it's not alive. It's a pumping, exciting story. But he brings it so down to earth, and he brings down all the different understandings and the commentaries in a very nice way. I forgot what it's called. I forgot how you call it. It's not fiction. But there's a particular genre where it's
like creative nonfiction, maybe they call it
something like that. It's like true fiction, something like that. Yeah. I don't know what it's called, but where it's like he throws in ideas in order to weave it together, which aren't necessarily the truth of it, but to bring out the main points. And it's so worthwhile, and if anyone's listening to this goes to any Sunday schools, I just took away the material from all your teachers.
Let's speak a little bit tactical, because the Haggadah was not written like that Yosef Deutsch exciting book, right? And the Haggadah could be, with all of the fascinating, it's not a storybook, and the Haggadah is written as a somewhat of a tedious book. How do you make the Haggadah, the actual reading of the Haggadah, exciting?
Well, first of all, it's important to know that sometimes we can get caught up in, we have to do every single part of everything to get everything. There's a well-known rule in Judaism, that is tafasta meruba lo tafasta. If you grab too much, you end up grabbing nothing. And there's a concept known as echad amar b'vechad amamid. What do you do a lot? You do a lot. We have to have our heart in the right place. The focus of the Seder, the longest, most tedious part, is known as Magid. Magid is a Magid. Step number 5 out of 15 steps. Now, it sounds like a lot, like 15 steps. That's so much. If you take Magid out, the other 14 steps are 15 or 20 minutes. It's not. It's the end. There's a bunch of paragraphs, right? But the major play of the Seder is the middle part, which is known as Magid. In order to actually fulfill it, the step number 5, to at least its quote unquote minimal requisites, is that you have to speak out the fact that we were slaves and we went from avdus, from slavery, to cherus, to freedom. If you repeat after me, we were slaves and we are no longer slaves, we are now free, you've just finished step number 5. In other words, you've spoken out the story. The story is we were slaves and then we were freed. That's the whole story. That's literally the whole step. Now, there's a lot more than that. The biggest, and I think besides eating, I think you'd agree, the biggest step is that step of Magid, which actually goes through quite, like you said, detailed storyline. Where we were, what steps took, what happened, how do we go through, etc., all these things. What I would recommend is before the Seder, This is not the night when you sit down at the Seder. I'm talking about now when you're listening to this tonight, get a Haggadah. First of all, they have them in every language. But if you understand me right now, you probably speak English. So they have it in English. Take it in
Although I
English.
wonder, like those listeners in like, the Scandinavian countries, like, what are they, do they understand anything? Or are they just listening?
Look, you need numbers. That's all you need here. So
exactly. Wherever you are, just listen, whether you understand the language or not.
Donate too. Anyway, so the one thing is I recommend this is, I think the biggest mistake that many people make in life is we don't prepare. We just gotta take a stat like right now, tonight. Hopefully you listen to this at least a week, 2, 3 before the actual Passover Seder. Call your Lord, as we call your local Orthodox rabbi, call up your rabbi and say, what do you recommend? Like, what book do you recommend that I use? Like, which Seder, which Haggadah? I have in my house, I'm not going to exaggerate when I say to you, there's probably 40 different Haggadahs, probably 40 different styles and languages and whatever. Find one that, someone recommends, and then sit down beforehand, take a brief overview, a glance, and see what it's about. If you feel good, one technique that people like to do is that I've seen many times, and if my kids are cooperative, I try, is I say, I try to go around the room and have each one read another paragraph, right? So it's not that everyone's reading the paragraph together, whatever, but have one read it out loud, and then open for discussion if anyone has what they want to add. What does that mean? What can we learn from that idea? What's that coming to tell us? And move on to the next and the next, and give everyone a place that they can be part of this. This depends on ages. This very, very much depends on ages. If you have people that are older than younger and are interested in being part, maybe even give them beforehand, tell them a week before. I'd love it if you could read paragraph 4, like maybe share an idea with us.
Nice. Yeah.
When you have people involved, it changes the whole feeling. No one feels like they're being lectured. They feel like they're part of a bigger discussion.
So your oldest child, your oldest is a girl, correct?
Yeah, my oldest is a girl.
She's a teen. She must be a mid-teen by now. Is she? How old is your oldest?
My oldest is 17.
17. So, okay, and then you have younger ones all in their teens. So let's just take
going down to 3.
Okay, so let's just say the 17. What's under the 17-year-old?
15.
Okay, let's think about this, and that's a boy, right?
Girl.
So let's say you take 17-year-old girl and 15-year-old girl. Rav Gav, what would you like them, 17-year-old girl and 15-year-old girl, what do you want them to walk away with this year at this Seder? Is that a fair question?
I didn't think about it this year enough to know.
Okay, last year.
It's like 5 years ago, before Corona. Like, what did you want? Whatever. I'll tell you like this. I have no problem repeating things. For me, the number one thing is for myself and hopefully for my children to walk away and to understand that God is in your life every day. Hashem is with you. God is with you. For the good times, for the challenging times, nothing is random. Nothing is random. There's a rhyme and a reason to everything, which essentially, if we were able, and by we I mean all of us, were able to really, as I jokingly, but then we'll say for real, let go and let Gav. If we were able to let go and let God, our lives would be so different. Yeah. We wouldn't be yelling in traffic and that's the example I always give because that's my biggest challenge. Like we wouldn't be going crazy in the car, and and what happens if we miss this, or if the kid breaks that, or if we don't get that, et cetera, all the things. Wait a minute, you mean God's involved in that also? Yes, God's involved in that also. I don't need if I can get that personally And if I can get my kids, that's the most important thing that I'm looking for, to understand that God loves you deeply, personally, as involved in your life in every aspect. I think that everything else flows from that.
I love it. I love it. Okay, we have a few minutes left. I know it's really late. You're in Jerusalem, so it's really, really late. We have a few minutes left. So this last part, the last few minutes of this podcast is always my favorite. I save it for the last because it's a little bit creepy, but I am a big fan of life hacking and just hearing how beautiful people like yourself like really tick, and what makes Rav Gav. So I just want to fire off a couple of questions. Give me just the short answers, whatever you're willing to share. Everyone has like their habit, their routine that really, like, when you wake up in the morning, this is going to be the highlight of your day, or when you look at it your week, this is the thing that really drives you, that you would say, I attribute my success and the joy of my life to this habit or routine. Do you have something like that? And if yes, what is it?
Daf Yomi.
Okay, explain.
Study of the daily page. We know there's something known as the Talmud, the Gemara, part of the oral tradition, one of the biggest bodies of work of the oral tradition. You have the Mishnah and the commentary on that. And there are approximately, I think not more than that, it's 5,422 pages of Gemara. Most people say 2711, but for those who are used to, every other page being a page. So, and it's broken down into a study of daily learning of one page a day. I give a class in it. So for me, to be able to go ahead and prepare that, give that over, that for me is, so it's amazing. Every day learning something new. And over time, today we finished Seder Moed, which is, I can't, whatever. The Hamivin Yavin, those who get it. It is an incredible feeling of accomplishment. And my day without it, I don't drink coffee. I don't do drugs. So I don't drink coffee, but my, is that too personal for people? So
I'm a big coffee drinker, so I'm just biting my lip.
My day is miserable until I finish it.
I love
it's like a person needs their coffee. You don't have your coffee. So for me, I need that. That's it.
By the way, I just want to share now with the listeners that we actually did an episode, and I'm looking back at the date. It was posted on August 31st, 2021, with a rabbi named Daniel Friedman, not related to you, I don't think. Daniel Friedman, he's now putting out books with just short practical lessons from every single day's daf, and he's putting out a whole series of books. And he spoke also about Daf Yomi on the podcast. For those of you interested in looking back and listening, also very, very fascinating. And now there's actually I know you're not on social media, but there's now a young woman who's posting every single day just a short little TikTok called Daf Reactions that's created quite a stir, which is also based on Daf Yomi, but it's probably very different than your daily class.
A bit different. Yeah.
Tell me this, who do you draw your inspiration from, right? We all have Rav Gav to inspire us, but who inspires Rav Gav?
If I can quote, what's his name? Somebody.
Okay.
What he said was, it's a guy today, he's an actor. I saw him say this once, and I was really moved by what he said. He said that he inspires himself in years from now. So in other words, seeing where he knows he can be, then pushes himself to be able to do even more. Okay. With me in particular, it's not a matter of a particular individual that I'm inspired by per se. I'm really not. I'm inspired by people that are maximizing their potential, or at least the way that I perceive it. So it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I'm inspired. On the other hand, I hate them because I see that they're doing it, and I know I can, and I'm not. So that it gives me a nice little kick when I see people doing that, and when I can think about it, I can do that also. I can do that. I just have to sit down and go for it. I can tell you after the podcast names of people who I love and hate.
Mhm.
because they're really maximizing. So yeah, that's
I
it's
love
it's
that.
not a. And by the way, I'll tell you something else. It's not only in terms of like Judaism. It's anyone who maximizes potential, and I see that they're doing it, even if I don't agree with what they're doing. But the fact is that you're really doing it, like you're going for it, and you're giving it your all. That to me is like, I could do that. I could do that also. You know what I'm saying?
I could totally relate to
But
that.
if I'm allowed to, of blessed memory, we'll call Kobe Bryant. Who like gave his all. I had to go back years earlier. A guy named John Havlicek. Who was like in the basketball scene also in the '60s, '70s, '60s. Who also was like very big and like, gave it everything he can. Emmett Smith, in football. And a lot of times you see it in sport, Michael Phelps, people that
Yeah.
push themselves in certain areas. And then you have people that can study, that just slow and steady wins the race consistently, day in and day out, are plugging and doing and what they're supposed to be doing. That for me is something which I draw inspiration from.
Love it. Do you ever feel burnout? And if you do, what do you do to get out of it?
I mean, that's the answer is absolutely. I feel burnout, but it depends on what we're talking about. There's different areas of life where there's burnt out. Thank God I have never felt burnt out of life. I thank God for that. I know some people have a really hard time and struggle in certain areas. I certainly have burnt out, felt very burnt out in teaching tremendously, because when I teach so much, next tonight, even I went to go teach somewhere on my way there right before this discussion, on my way there, I'm like, I said to my daughter, who was in the car with me, I was driving her off somewhere. I said, I am so not interested in teaching right now. I'm just not interested. When I get in there, though, once I start, I'm in. I'm good.
Right.
It's not even. I'm not faking it. But it's just like, yeah. So what do I do about it? The answer is like anything in life, and maybe it's not like I take that back. Maybe this is not as well known. There's a great piece of work written by a fellow named Rav Shlomo Volby, who I said that right? Rav
Yeah.
Shlomo Volby,
Perfect.
right?
Volby, yeah, either one.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it. But anyway, Rav Shlomo, who wrote a book called Alei Shor. And I think it's on, if I remember correctly, it's on page Lamed Dalet, page 34. It's called Yimei Ava Hasina Vayush. Takes
I love
love,
that piece.
hate, and despair, 2.5 pages. So powerful. And he basically discusses this idea, what happens when you feel burnout? And the answer is you don't stop what you're doing. Maybe don't push more, but at least continue your day. Once in a while, you have to take off here, there, and the other. You got to do what you got to do. But basically, you keep pushing forward, not pushing yourself beyond. Like the way I look at it is like when you're driving, you coast, but at least coast. Don't
Hold on
stop
to the baseline, right?
You stop the car, it shuts off, and it's very hard to turn it back on. So what I personally like to do is, based off the structure of my day, because I'm teaching and giving this and learning that, and then I have my kids to deal with and my wife, and we're dealing with that. I don't really have the opportunity to say I'm not going to do things today. It just doesn't work, So at least coast, at least keep moving forward, and then pray. Lord Almighty, help me get out of this.
Wow. Oh, Rav Gav, we got to make you a usual on the podcast. This was so much fun. I loved having this conversation with you. Keep on doing your amazing, amazing work. I enjoyed so much spending time with you at the recent convention and having this conversation with you today. And wish you continued blessing and hatzlacha and bracha and all that you do.
The one who has blessed me should be blessed as well. Amen. Amen and hallelujah. This is great. And for all those who are listening, again, support the podcast. This is like serious business. Everybody listens up. Let's think about it. How many pearls of wisdom are gleaned from the different discussions that you've had with people? I'm sure tons of stuff. People are getting so much. It's so worthwhile. Give back a little, help out a little bit. I think it can go very far away. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank all y'all for listening, for whoever's listening. And have a very happy Passover and a meaningful Passover where we can connect with ourselves, our family, friends, and maybe a little bit of God.